Hi, everybody. It's February 20th, 2025, and this is the weekly Backdrop Dev meeting. We get together every week to talk about priorities for Backdrop CMS Core. My name is Nate Lampton. I'm Quick Sketch on the internet, and I am the technical lead and a core committer for the Backdrop CMS project. Just have a handful of our team members here today. We've got Tim and Martin, and I'll let each of you do a quick intro. We'll start with Tim.
Hey, my name's Tim Erickson. I'm St. Paul Tim. I'm in Deerwood, Minnesota, where it has warmed up to 20 degrees Fahrenheit today. 20 degrees more than yesterday.
Working towards that 0 degrees Celsius. All right, Martin.
And I'm Martin Price, Yorkshire Pudding around Backdrop, and I'm a Backdrop developer and contributor based in Northeast England.
Great. Thank you both. As a reminder to people that might watch these videos retroactively, these are totally open meetings. You can get information about them from backdropcms.org on the Getting Involved page from the navigation. And also, probably the best way is to get connected via Zulip first, which is our online chat platform, and then follow the threads of discussion there because we're always discussing the weekly meetings a little bit before they happen and collecting ideas for topics and things of that nature over chat before the meetings actually occur. So best thing to do if you're interested in engaging directly is get logged into Zulip, get signed up into Zulip, and then join from there into these weekly meetings. All right, let's see. We've got a little bit of fun news that's in the pipeline here. I'm going to go ahead and start sharing my screen to show the agenda. There's two pending showcases of new websites that have launched on Backdrop, and these showcases aren't launched yet, but I want to pull up the websites just because they both look nice. We've got Universal Hub, which is a long time Drupal site from the contributor that wrote uh, the showcase, Adam Gaff. This has been on Drupal since Drupal 4.7, and he moved it onto Backdrop. And so great to see these long-term old school Drupal websites moving forward onto Backdrop. And then we've got core contributor Laren and his company that he works for, Atten, have redone this website, steamboatlibrary.org. And we love library websites, so awesome to see that being upgraded also from Drupal 7 onto Backdrop. And so both of these have showcases that are in draft right now, and we're working on finalizing the editorial content on that to get these two website showcases published. So thank you both, Laren and Adam, for submitting those.
Maybe we should mention for anybody watching that they can submit their own showcases.
Oh yes. Yeah, I think what's the editorial pathway on that, Tim? Do you know off the top of your head?
Um, I'm not sure off the top of my head. I believe that if you create an account on backdrop.org, that there will be an option somewhere. I don't know where it is, where you can start a showcase and it will be unpublished. And then somebody else, I think, has to publish it for you.
Yeah, that's my recollection as well, that
Yes.
anybody with a user account on backdropcms.org is capable of creating some types of content, but they might need approval first.
And some people choose not to create showcases, but they do just sort of post links when they launch sites in Zulip. And there was another site that just launched this morning that isn't a showcase that was announced in Zulip. So that's
Oh,
another good place to either see what other people are doing or to announce your own project if you don't want to go into a showcase.
let's see, which one is that? Is this
Steve
one?
Morehouse did something. Uh,
Oh, B Zumpf?
yeah, I think so. Yeah, that's it.
Okay, let me pull that one up too, just for fun. So
Yeah.
here we go. Oh, this is cool looking. bzumpf.com.
And the interesting thing is this was, if I understood correct, this came from Word. Oh, sounds like it. Oh no, that's a different site. Okay, never mind. He mentions then another site that he's about to start working on. I thought it was this one.
Hmm. I like this. It's interesting the look of this website, and just from the drop down here,
Hmm.
I can tell that this is largely derived from Basis, right?
Right.
Like this is the Basis navigation, and drop down styling. Um, but it doesn't look like Basis. Like,
Yeah.
without, I mean, the
Right.
topography, you'd have to look really close to be able to identify this offhand, as being a Basis
Yeah.
like derived theme. So yeah, great work.
Yeah. Steve mentioned that it was a real budget site. So I'm imagining that, yeah, like probably no big custom design, just taking basis and tweaking it to make it look different and unique. So good work, Steve.
Yep, I agree. We love low budget websites. It's our
Yeah.
whole bread and butter.
Yeah.
All right,
And
great.
and we can use case studies on those too. It's nice to show other people what you can do on a tight budget.
Yeah, so that's great. Thinking about low budget websites. That's great. Okay. All right. Let's see. Since last week, one other announcement is that we had one new contrib project come out, the Tiny MCE Code Highlight project. I can only imagine this is IndigoZilla yet again, really rounding out
Probably
the.
need to go a bit further back because there wasn't a meeting last week.
Oh, you're right. I forgot about that. Yeah, that there's some additional projects here. Okay, let me pull them up real quick since I've got the link here. So yeah, since we forgot last week's meeting, so that goes all the way back to February 6th then. So that means that we also had the Going Down module, Download Count, and Book Explorer modules all come out, since the last meeting as well.
And
Yeah.
admin bar this page content type. I know, because that's one of mine.
Oh, you're right. Yep. Sorry.
Uh, I'll just mention again for people watching, 3 weeks ago, we did a user group meeting, which was recorded, where we highlighted some recent, not the ones we just talked about, but a little further back in the list. We highlighted some fairly recent contrib modules. So if you want to see some demos of like 4 or 5 recent contrib modules, go to the Backdrop YouTube page and look for the user group meetings.
Yeah, just gonna take a quick look here into our overall contrib group where all of these live. Trying to see if there's a quick way to see all of the repositories. Yeah, there we go. Can we de-abbreviate that? 1,300 contrib repositories.
Mhm.
No way to expand it. Okay, well, even roughly 1,300 modules is or projects, because that includes themes. It's a very respectable amount.
It is.
Actually, compared to our overall site install base, that's a little bit frightening.
Right.
You know.
Like there's one project for every 3 sites.
Right, exactly. But that's great. I do love, in some ways, just trying to spin a little yarn about what that really means. So if we've got roughly, what is it, 3,600 websites?
Yeah.
Is that about right? Um,
We
and
got 30, the most recent count is 3,700,
oh, great.
3,701, 3,701. There's been, and I'll just say on that, I've been tracking it pretty closely. And there's been a slight uptick like for the last month, which
Great.
may coincide to the end of Drupal 7's life. It could be an anomaly, and it could sort of like, because the list is fairly volatile, but I feel like it's been this little uptick has been just long enough that I feel like it's not just an anomaly. That there actually was a small uptick, and it's not a huge uptick, but definitely
Yeah.
noticeable.
Yeah. I wouldn't doubt it at all.
Mhm.
It seems like the pace of 777, you know, evacuation is also increased a little bit, so the
Right.
777 rate of decline is
Yeah.
increased quite a bit. Um, yeah, but it's also just because I can't help but just you know uh, yammer about this for a little bit every single time it comes up, just because it's so interesting to see like what is happening in the present day.
Mhm.
In that since the 777 end of life, which has been almost 2 months now,
Mhm.
um, the the status quo didn't change that much, right? Like, I mean, there's small shifts, like the increase of maybe backdrop sites and the decrease of 777 sites, but a whole lot of stuff didn't change. Like Drupal.org still running 777, and there's just a kind of the continuity is kind of there, but um, what there has been some kind of hard drop-offs, like particularly around security, which isn't surprising, but that was kind of the only thing that was still happening in the 777 world was security releases. And we had some pivots and changes on our side in that um, uh, there's now like policies have changed a little bit as to when Drupal is going to start reporting CVEs, and the script is going to become flipped here pretty quickly, where Backdrop has a more comprehensive security policy than Drupal does now for creating CVEs, and it's very likely that Backdrop will start reporting CVEs, and Drupal will stop reporting CVEs when security releases occur. And previously, what we'd been doing is we point at Drupal's CVEs when they have one, because the policy from MITRE, the organization that aggregates all of the vulnerabilities, uh, is that if you've got derivative software, they don't like to have CVEs for every derivative. They like everybody to point at the same one. Um, and we'd been pointing at Drupal's when we had the same exploit in both softwares. But now Drupal is likely to stop filing CVEs because the software is unsupported, but we will continue to. And so it's totally possible that we'll end up with this flipped situation where we will now start requesting more CVEs directly, and Drupal may or may not point at our CVEs instead. So it's an interesting, yeah, that's one thing that that did change, but it's just kind of a reporting thing. But overall, we're still sorting out like what this looks like now, because the Drupal security team no longer wants to really be involved in the process, and the d7security.org website and organization hasn't quite figured out their processes yet. So anyway, interesting.
Yep.
Uh, yeah. Any other commentary or thoughts on end of life? Okay, let's get back to Backdrop then. It was a busy week this week. Speaking of security releases, we had two themes that had security releases yesterday in one module. You can read about those at backdropcms.org/security. They were all XSS vulnerabilities, so not highly critical ones, but uh, a good reason to update your themes or modules. But also in this past week, on Tuesday, day before yesterday, we released Backdrop 130.1. So it's a couple weeks later than when we had been hoping to get it out, because there were a couple of regressions that were introduced in 1.30 that were substantial, especially for users upgrading from Drupal 7. And so it's a bad time to have upgrade problems going from 777 when there's a larger number of people coming from 777 all at the same time. So I'm happy to see 1.30.1 come out. And the 777 issue in particular was that, here it is, um, running update.php as an anonymous user would send you into a redirect loop. And you could get past it, but if you knew the URLs, but it was not good. So this issue being fixed makes it so that we can get those sites running update.php. And this anonymous user problem is particularly of concern because um, everybody coming from 777 had to use the update free access and anonymous route to update their sites. And so that was problematic. There also was this little issue here, issue 6852, and this was flagged as a bug, but it's a useful new ability that in the database abstraction layer, there's the ability to do subqueries by passing an entire query object into a condition, into the condition method, but you couldn't do that on joins in Backdrop up until this issue was merged. This feature had been added to Drupal 7, which was a backport out of Drupal 8, and this issue just brings Backdrop up to parity to add that ability. So, I mean, it's a niche thing. It's very API oriented, but it's also like this is kind of a new capability, but it's flagged as a bug report because when an API is missing between Drupal 7 and Backdrop, we consider that to be a bug. So, but still a nice ability to get added into Backdrop. Yeah, I don't think the other ones in here have a whole lot of things to discuss. I do really like the the UX improvements. The dialogue for layouts when you're editing a block is made a little bit bigger, and the login page, the logo is made a little bit smaller. Both really good improvements. I like this. Not sure if there's a nice screenshot here. Yeah, so when you're using the 7 theme, the logo that ships with 7 is the Backdrop logo, and it was just oversized. And now here we go. Now it's just shrunk down a bit into a reasonable size. And this only applies, we basically just added a max height as well as a maxed width so that tall or square logos don't take up such a large amount of visual space. Okay, so that's it for yeah, the recap of 130.1. I'm really happy to have that release out. I think the entire RTBC queue was completely empty. So that was great that just everything that was pending, at least at that state, had gotten in. Friendly reminder to people that moving stuff out of needs review and into RTBC is one of the things that I appreciate the most. So just taking a look at our overall queue. So I think that it's still the case. Let's see. It's only been 2 days. Yeah, okay. So RTBC is currently empty. That's great. But one of the best groups to look at is things that are works for me and still need code review. This seems to be the combination that has a short list, but is usually in really good shape. So there's only 11 issues in this category. And if you expand that to just the ones that are works for me, then there's 26. But just moving these into the, into the final state of ready to be committed, that's the queue that I look at primarily for what are the things that need action right away. Please don't move it into that. If you just want my feedback, ping me in Zulip. So, great. Let's see. So now we've got 130.2 will be the next bug fix release. And there are a lot of things in the 130.2 milestone. Martin, who's here in this meeting, specifically called out this one as being one of interest for him. Martin, do you want to give a quick recap of this issue and describe what's necessary here?
Yeah, a lot of places, whether it's module themes, content types, we have descriptions alongside each of the different types. And I noticed that while with flexible layouts, although we collected the description in the UI, we didn't use it, and also that none of the core layout templates had any descriptions. So I thought we could quite easily add that into the table. So started off just trying to bundle it in there and realized it would be better as in a description column. So that's where we've ended, and I've just created So if you look at the latest thing, you'll see this is, had a bit of feedback from Tim. So we've sort of got it down to being quite concise and precise as to what they are and what they where some of them are used for things by default. So there's not a lot of lines of code, and there's just the descriptions, which I understand. Descriptions can sometimes be the most contentious things, but hopefully, as these are just very factual based, they won't be too contentious.
And this is not the list of layouts. This is the list of layout templates, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, that makes it pretty. I think that's a great reason to, or great place to put a description. Now I don't have my local running, but yeah, I don't see this as being problematic anyway, because it's not a very common page to visit anyway. It's only when you're going to be adding templates or turning them off that you're going to visit here, and that's when a description would be most useful. So yeah, seems to make sense to me. Yeah, and yeah, as you detailed here, that's what we're doing in other UIs for the most part. So
I didn't
consistent.
hear Martin's whole description, but I think it was triggered, if he probably already said this, but it was triggered in part by like custom flexible layout templates. If you create a flexible layout template now and you give it a description, it'll show up, whereas it wouldn't before. So, so
Yeah.
if you've created multiple layout, flexible layout templates, you can now like distinguish them and have good descriptions.
Yeah. We could probably throw this into the milestone. I'm gonna just to follow our process. Next fix milestone. So our process for this, as a reminder, is that one person adds it as a milestone candidate, and then another person that agrees can then put it into the milestone if they have the triage permission. So that's the invitation for Martin to go in and say yes and put it into the milestone.
I didn't realize I could do that.
Oh
I
yeah.
wasn't sure whether you can do what you could do as the author of a pull request, or whether it seemed to be.
Well, I think if as long as somebody else, yeah, as the author of the pull request, normally the author puts it into the candidate status, and normally someone else then agrees. But it doesn't matter who the two people are. Just one person
Okay.
says, "I think this is a good candidate," and then another person had to say, "I agree," and then throw it into the milestone.
Maybe quickly go to the page on the doc site. There's a page for adding milestones to issues that people should remember they can look at. And basically what the it's documentation and then just slash under contributors guide.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. And so any issue doesn't need a PR, does it, to get into the milestone? But it says there's one exception, which is if something has a PR and is like RTBC, you can just add it automatically.
Yeah.
To the
So
milestone.
if it's really close, then you can skip the agreement process and
Right.
just move it into the milestone, which I do all the time when I think that something is on the cusp and it would be nice to get it in.
And it's by no means a requirement, but whenever I like add a milestone, I usually link to this page just to help remind people that these are the policies. So, because I think a lot of people don't know them and they don't know what they can do and how to do this. And so I feel like every time I add something to a milestone, that's just an opportunity to remind people. These are what the policies are.
So thoughtful, Tim. Thank you. Yeah, but nowhere in here, in this process, in this policy process, does it state that, the author or not the author. It's just one person and a different person. So
yeah, that's always been my understanding.
Yeah, and it does say that if it's in a state of near ready state, then you can add both
I can't remember if we were in the middle of something else, but could we talk about the minor release milestone criteria quickly since we're here?
Yeah, and since we need minor milestone issues right now, yeah, go
Right.
ahead.
Well, I don't know. It's been probably 5 or 6 years ago since we started this whole advocate thing, and I feel like for a while it worked really well, and I think people have kind of lost awareness of it. It's still being used. I mean, don't get me wrong, it's still being used, but so the current idea is to get something in the minor release milestone. Is that the primary criteria is it needs an advocate, and an advocate doesn't need to be somebody who's actually writing the PR. I often describe it as just like a project manager or what is the term you use in bigger agencies? Like an owner, a feature owner or something.
Yeah,
Um,
product owner.
Product owner. Well, the product would be the whole software, right? But basically, somebody to take some ownership for that and just try to help, like summarize the issue and encourage. And I've had good success as an advocate getting PRs that I didn't have anything to do with writing into core, largely just by sort of advocating for them. Other people have stepped up, written the PR, and then I just help test it. I help make sure it keeps moving forward. And the idea is that anybody that's active in the community can be an advocate for an issue, but you can only be an advocate for one issue at a time. And for a while, we had people getting out in front and saying, I'm going to advocate for this issue. And we would have 7 or 8 different issues in the milestone, even though some of them might not even have PRs. What I've been seeing lately more and more is that we don't think about the advocacy until we get further in the process. Like somebody's got a PR, it's starting to get close, and we're like, oh, we want to get this in the milestone. We need an advocate. And I would just, well, one, I'd like to know is this whole advocacy thing working for us still? Should we do something different? And or if it is working for us, I'd just like to sort of remind people that they can be a little bit more proactive about that, like, find an issue. And I think it's also important to say that just because you advocate for an issue doesn't mean it's going to get into court. There
Mhm.
is still a core committer process of deciding whether or not it belongs in court. But I think once you've advocated for an issue and put it in the milestone, it's very quickly going to get feedback from like Nate. Anytime you see something in the issue in the milestone, you're going to like review it and say, does this belong in court? Right? Is that
Yeah.
fair? Yeah.
Yep. Yeah,
So
like I was just saying that there's lists of things that I look at, and one of
yeah,
them is the RTBC queue, but the other thing is
yeah,
the next minor milestone. And right now there's only 2
yeah,
items in here.
yeah. And it used to be that the first thing I would do after every release was get excited about what I'm going to advocate for next. And like I think I've done that less. It's like now I'm more doing the other thing. I wait till later in the cycle, and I find something that is close to getting released but isn't in the milestone, and then I advocate for it. But I kind of like the idea of actually getting out and saying what isn't there that I'd really like to try to get there, even if it isn't, far along, but I want to, if you're picking something to advocate for, you definitely want to pick something where you can see a path, right? If it's too like a wild idea and there's no acceptance criteria, but or anything like that, it's much harder. But
Hmm.
if yeah, there's a lot of issues out there that like have PRs even already, and they just need an advocate and somebody to sort of push them forward to get them into core, and those are the best ones. So, how do you think? Do you think the whole advocacy thing is still working, Nate?
Well, the the reason why we added it
Mhm.
was to create focus.
Yeah,
That everybody was working on different things all the time, and a lot of stuff wasn't getting done. It was like you know, we wouldn't have people collaborating. Everybody would just be doing their own thing, and that was the idea to focus, like how we could get things to work on for the next minor release. Um,
something else that when we first introduced the advocacy, the idea was that at the dev meeting each week, we would start out and look at the things on the milestone. So there was an incentive to like advocate for something because that assured that it would be on the agenda.
mhm.
And I think over time we've gotten a little bit away from that. Not completely. I think we still kind of do that, but it's been a little less the focus. And uh, And that may have also sort of influenced how people. But I don't know. Yeah, I don't have strong feelings about like, I don't know the best way to do this, but
Yeah, I'd be open, to suggestions and thoughts about what other ways we could determine our priorities for the next minor release. I think that's what I would like out of this if
Yeah.
we removed the advocacy system, if
it's an alternative.
what would be the alternative? Yeah.
Yeah.
And kind of like we were just looking at the processes for putting stuff into milestones. Um, Stuff can be moved into the minor milestone without an advocate too. But again, if it's like if it gets really close. And so the advocacy thing is not a requirement to get something into the minor release.
Right.
It's just the way that we draw attention to particular issues is if there's an advocate, then it gets more visibility and it gets into the milestone earlier and it doesn't need to have a pull request first. Like just all of these things. It's like if somebody is owning it, then it gets more attention. And from that aspect, I still really like the intention there. That there is another pathway if you just want to, tunnel and do it on your own and, but you're not going to get a whole lot of feedback up until like you get a pull request that's working and ready for testing. Like you can go that way. It's just that there might be more efficient ways to work with better feedback if you put yourself out there a little bit, or if someone else puts themselves out there as an advocate to help support the developer that's working on the problem. So I don't know. My initial thinking right now is like off the cuff. Like I think the advocacy system is better than nothing, and I do like that there's a structure to things, and I do like that it's not a hard rule either. It's like you can still get stuff in without an advocate, and stuff does often. But it often only happens like in the last couple weeks of a release cycle, which is a stressful and like, yeah, yeah, and sometimes stuff doesn't get in at the last minute, and that can be disappointing. So, yeah, advocacy is better than none. I think that we've got a history to show that.
So the summary of this is if there's an issue that you'd really like to see in court, now is a great time to advocate for it because you'll get it into the milestone. We'll have a
Yep.
lot of time to talk about it, hopefully build some momentum. It doesn't guarantee it's going to get in, but it's a great way to push it along. And the only commitment you're making as an advocate is that you're going to kind of pay attention to that issue. What's really helpful, some issues just need a summary. They need somebody to go back and say, okay, this has been out there for a while. These are the things we've decided. These are the blockers that we need to address. And that will really help move it forward.
Yep. Yeah, that's a great transition because the next thing I wanted to talk about was the next minor release. So yeah, Backdrop 131, that'll be the May 15th release, May 15th, 2025. And there's only a few things in the 1.30 milestone right now. Let me try to find that tab again. It's gone. Well, let's see, milestones 131. Yeah, so there's only a couple things in here. This one got bumped from the 1.30 milestone, the allow layouts to have multiple paths. So this one needs work. I think HerbDuel is the champion of this one. Yeah. Does not say he's an advocate though, because this is one of those ones that he was an advocate for other issues, and this one was like a secondary objective. But
And it was very close, but so it would be great if somebody would advocate for this, but I mean, it is still pretty close, right? There's a,
it is still really close. Yeah. So that's why it's still in here. Also, this one doesn't have an advocate, but it's kind of required, and that's support for the newest version of PHP 8.4. And just before the meeting today, I went and updated this pull request, so it's back to a needs review status. All the feedback is addressed. This pull request also, at the same time as we move to 8.4 support, we drop support for PHP 5.6 and 7.0, which was discussed and announced on our news site. It was voted on by the PMC as approved. So you can see that the testing version here goes from we we start testing at PHP 7.1 now instead of 5.6. So 7.1 will be the minimum PHP version moving forward. The latest changes on this pull request make it so that it keeps getting smaller, which is great. So there's fewer and fewer changes instead of yeah, and just because we found better and more compatible ways of working. The real big change here is that basically we're adding a bunch of question marks. So that this is characteristic of the total change here is that you know, whenever we have an object or a complex data structure like an array that has a default value of null, you got to put a question mark in front of it. It's kind of a stupid thing to drop PHP 5.6 support for, quite honestly, but here we are. You know, PHP has given us, you know, decades to make this change, and we just like being able to support as many users as possible, and so we drag our feet on stuff like this. But yeah, now is the time because we can't keep supporting old versions of PHP and new versions at the same time, and this is what's causing us to make that bump. So anyway, that needs review. Like I said, it's pretty small, not too difficult to review at this point, and I also think that it's pretty unlikely to cause breaks at this point because it's very compatible in the approach that we've used. But yeah, let's look forward to 131. Speaking of things that need advocates, and maybe it's because I'm focused on this 8.4 issue right now, but where I would like to be looking for 1.31 is automatic updates. It's one of our top 5 feature requests. Let's go look at that just for fun. Oops. It's over on the forum. We've got the wish list and our top 5 here. Field group functionality is number 1. Automatic updates is number 2. Multiple file uploads is number 3. Better views bulk operations, select all items on all pages is number 4. And support or move the title display settings to the manage display form is number 5. So it's always fun. Well, I mean, it is fun now. Like we've been working through these top 5 issues. I think we've got one every release for the last several releases, and so the top 5 keeps changing, which is awesome. So anyway, so number 2, automatic updates is where I'm trying to put my focus for this release. And this is a follow-up from 1.30 where we added backup capabilities to update.php, that it's a complementary piece of functionality that leads nicely into automatic updates. So before the automatic update occurs, you'll also have an automatic backup. So we've got this list of sub items here to track. And one thing I'm still not totally sure about, and I need to start doing some evaluation on it, is whether or not these 2 items around signatures are kind of complementary to each other. One of them is that we should start putting signatures on packages when you download them and in the feed of updates. And then the other one is that we should start checking them before you install them. So both of these signature issues, yeah, oh, look at that. I'm still an advocate for this. John Franklin did this years and years ago. I mean, this was almost a decade ago. But yeah, 115 milestone, and now we're on 131. But it's interesting that you know, times change, and this CodeSign project, which is still a really great start and probably where we'll pick up and start using code from. CodeSign was intended to be a module that gets bundled with core that can both sign and check signatures on packages. But the way CodeSign was implemented at the time was using, I think, OpenSSL. And maybe we should continue doing that, but there's now built into PHP um, the signing library or encryption library Sodium. And it's only in PHP 7.2 and higher, but you can install it on older versions using the extension. But uh, I think it may be, still needs evaluation. It may be reasonable for us to simply say you'll only get automatic updates if you're on PHP 7.2 and higher, like automatic
Yeah.
updates for Backdrop Core. It's also totally valid and I think possible for us to just say you could just disable signature checking if you wanted to, and older versions just wouldn't have signatures. Older versions of PHP wouldn't have signature checking, and newer ones would. I mean, the
I
importance of
just wonder how common, because I noticed on that it says Linux PHP has to be compiled with Sodium. I just wonder how common that would be on like shared hosting or.
That's also a great question about how, because you can still not have it installed. And my understanding is that this does happen commonly, that you have a new version of PHP, but it's not compiled with Sodium. So that's another thing that we might need to figure out. Maybe we could throw that into telemetry even before we start using it. We could detect if Sodium is available and start tracking that, even if we're not using it, just to get that information. Yeah. We have the technology to get that information now. Well, something that I have yet to evaluate personally and something I'd like opinions on is where does signatures actually fit as far as being a requirement for automatic updates in the first place? Um, we have the self-updater as we have it right now, and we have the ability to upload or like download projects using B or previously with Drush. Um, we have the ability to use Project Installer right now. All of these things don't have signatures on them right now. It would be great if all of them did. Um, and automatic updates would benefit in the same way that it would just be validated that this came from backdropcms.org and didn't come from an arbitrary location. So all of these things would be nice. They're nice to haves and definitely an improvement on security, but are they a requirement for automatic updates? I don't know yet. It's a matter of like where we should be putting our focus. Um, if we should, because signatures, like this issue 1992 has demonstrated, it's been kind of a sticking point for us. They're complicated because they require updates to project module, to backdropcms.org, to backdrop itself. There's a lot of coordination that needs to happen there. I mean, that's kind of true for automatic updates as well, but less so because the changes are already in place to make it so that Backdrop can self-update right now. You just need to do it manually. And so automatic updates having Backdrop update itself is largely self-contained into the core project and doesn't need any further coordination. But the signature part has more moving pieces to it. So I don't know. Open to feedback. It'd be great if you do have thoughts on this. You can post to this meta issue 2018. I'll post some comments here also because this is where I'd like my focus to be for the next release, and I'll reflect that in the issue queue.
You have just a couple more minutes, Nate? It's
Uh-huh.
almost the hour.
Oh
I
yeah.
just like some input on a possible issue for me to focus on. I actually am in the process of upgrading probably my biggest Drupal 7 site to Backdrop that I've ever done. I assumed that the client really wanted the ability to do, there's a, like number 7 on our list of features is save draft in core.
Mhm.
There's a Drupal 7 contrib module called save draft that just lets the idea is that right now you either have 2 states, right? A node is either published or not published. And we want to be able to have the editor make changes to a published node and put those changes in draft, but keep the node published, the previous version. The history of this, and I'm sure you're just remembering this, Nate, is that we did put the API for this into core already. We added an API that allows for more than just the 2 default states for a node, but there's no UI for it. And I think we did that like 4 years ago. And the idea was that we could later add the API, or that Contrib could add the API. To my knowledge, there is no module, core or Contrib, that actually uses this API. There is a module in development, the Workbench module for Drupal 7 did this. Yes. That's part of it. That I think that's the one we fixed, right? That was
Yeah,
adding
this
the
is
API. Yep,
the API portion. Yep.
exactly. So there is a module, the Workbench module did this stuff in Drupal 7, and Herb has done quite a bit of work on a module called content moderation, which I believe it was a submodule of Workbench. And it turns out the client I thought who would really, really want this, it turns out he doesn't actually do what I just described very often. So it's not as urgent for this client as I thought it would be. But this Delta Canyon just asked in the forum a few days ago for this feature. It's like number 7 on our list. And I guess my thought was I would just focus on working on the Contrib module, content moderation, which I think will provide this feature. But I thought I would at least throw it out here to see if anybody thought that, trying to get a UI for this in core would be a better use of effort. I mean, it can't hurt to do the Contrib module, but I mean, we had a UI. Doc Wilmot had a working UI for this in the original module. The reason it didn't get in was just all the decisions that would have to be made about exactly how it should look. Like, frankly, we've got really hung up on what do we call them, revisions or so just naming stuff. Those were some of the big issues we got hung up on. So, I mean, I think it's completely plausible that we could get a UI for this into core if people thought that was like important. On the other hand, we do have a Contrib module in works, and maybe it's better to, I'm happy to just sort of work on the Contrib module, get that working first, and then we can see.
Yeah.
I wanted to see if anybody had thoughts on that.
Martin, do you want to go? No. I don't need to focus on you. I just wanted to give you the opportunity.
No, I think revisioning would be important. I don't know whether
Is it important as a core feature though? Like, is it something we should really be focused on there? Or does it make sense to just
I think it's definitely something to aspire for as a core feature, because I think the key thing of being able to have forward revisions is probably a very I think it would be quite a key selling feature for people who want to get something published and then work on it in the background before then publishing the updated version.
Yeah, I find it interesting that that Workbench or content moderation, that these modules don't exist yet for Backdrop. That's a surprise to me that 5 years ago we made the API possible and that it hasn't been a priority for a developer or website or project yet to make a contrib version of that capability. Because what I'm thinking about is what I think it would be useful to be in core. Like it would
Yeah,
be a
yeah.
pretty tremendous capability to have be there. But I wonder how we should add it to core. Like the Drupal approach to almost everything these days is like make another module for it. But then you know to put these like alters on top of alters on top of alters. And we already made things kind of difficult in Backdrop because of the way that we have the draft and scheduled publishing, which by the way, scheduled revisions just throws you into a whole nother category of complexity. Um, and we decided that scheduling uh, is like there is the use case of like I want scheduled unpublishing or I want scheduled revisions. And when we implemented it into core, we were like, you know what? Just the ability to schedule publishing is the 90% plus use case here, and we should just do that. And so far that seems to have worked out pretty well. And I kind of wonder the same thing um, about just general workflow and forward revisions. Um, you know, whether we should, implement the simple, straightforward approach, and but make it more difficult for contrib to expand and change later, or if we should implement, forward revisions as a separate module that's included in core, like with the equivalent of Drupal's like workflow module. Um, I don't know. I don't know yet. We do tend to try to be a bit more opinionated and honestly like a little less flexible to make it so that the solutions we provide are easier to use, because but they're less flexible. But if they work for 90% of our users and sites, then that's great. So
I have been arguing for a long time that I really, 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 really want this feature on our doc site. Because in my opinion, I have been reluctant to edit docs pages for a long time because I don't have the ability to like save my revisions and have somebody review them before they get published. And I'm not confident, right, that my changes are actually correct. So I end up just like going and documenting it somewhere else instead of on the doc site. If I could save a revision, I would be way more comfortable making changes to the doc site and then sending a link to my revision to somebody else. Say, would you please review this revision? If it makes sense, then publish it.
yeah, thank you. Okay, great.
Okay.
So
But
food for
whether that's
food
a contrib
food for
module
thought.
or in core is not important.
Yeah. Yeah, well, yeah, doing it through Contrib is the easy, easy approach and users will be able to use it right away. And it also could be a good gauge of is this UI going to work and do people start installing it? Yeah, there's usually not too big of a downside to making it in Contrib. Only thing is that then we have to worry about an upgrade path when we incorporate something similar into core, but I don't think that should ever be a reason to not make it in Contrib.
I'm inclined to think that we probably need to do this in contrib first, just because I think it'll be much easier to have the UI discussion if we have something working that
Yeah,
people can try out and they can say, this is what I like about the UI or don't like, as opposed to having that be abstract.
yep,
Trying to
agreed.
guess.
Yeah, because everybody, I think, in the abstract are like, yes, I want forward revisions, right? But yeah, in use, like if it starts to burden editors all the time, then yeah, maybe it's not quite as great as we imagined. Yeah.
That's it.
Okay. Yeah, great. All right. Well, we're a little over time today. Let's go ahead and call it for today. Thank you, Tim and Martin, for being here. Great discussion on our policies and looking forward towards 1.31. Yeah, another shout out there to everybody. You know, find an issue that interests you. I know for many of our contributors, finding an issue isn't going to be a problem. But yeah, put yourself out there, please, and just say I'd like to advocate for this issue, and then put it into the 131 milestone, and then we can start bring a little bit of focus towards what that May 15th release is going to look like. Okay, thank you, everybody. We're going to end now. Thank you so much.